So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology, and welcome to 15 minutes of smartphone buying advice. Now, I've been wanting to do this one for a while because there's just so much I've learned over the years of not only being someone who reviews technology and smartphones, but also being a consumer on the other end, just like you. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is to be sure that you research the carrier that you're going to use and make sure that the coverage is strong in your area. For a little bit of context, I had used the prepaid carrier, I think it was Straight Talk, for a long time, and it was okay, it wasn't bad. But once I switched over to T-Mobile, my speeds were way faster. And that's just dependent on sometimes a postpaid carrier versus a prepaid carrier. So what I'm trying to get at here is that sometimes you might pay less for, a cheaper prepaid carrier or something like that. But if you just pay a little bit more for postpaid, you might get much faster speeds. And also sometimes you don't get tethering with those types of carriers. But if you're always a postpaid carrier anyway, I would consider actually thinking about which one has the best coverage in your area. So just look at the maps, kind of, talk around to people that you know how their coverage has been, and choose the one that actually fits the best for your area. You can even get a carrier that has worse coverage and be promoting 5G. But if that carrier doesn't have great coverage in your area, it does not matter if they have 5G because you're gonna have troubles connecting to that 5G network or that 4G LTE network. Okay, so the next thing is to decide, how are you gonna pay for this phone? Are you gonna pay for this phone with an outright cash payment, just one lump sum? Here's $1,000. I'm balling like that. Let me get that phone. Are you gonna pay this phone on financing month to month? You're gonna just pay a little chunk, maybe 30, 40 bucks a month on this device. Really consider this when buying a phone. Now, it makes sense to buy a phone outright if you're gonna keep it a long time, you're gonna protect it, and then you're just gonna try to sell it later on after like 4 or 5 years. If you're just keeping the phone, this is the type of person you are, I do recommend trying to buy it outright, because why make a payment if you're just going to keep it a long time anyway? Now, if you're the type of person who wants to jump to the next phone, you could actually use things like a jump program from T-Mobile. I think Verizon also has one of these. But if there's a program with your carrier that allows you to go to the next phone before you're finished paying off your phone, that's a good way to decide between, buying outright or financing. Are you going to jump to the next phone? Because if you are right away, what's the point in paying the full price? But keep in mind, when you don't pay for it upfront full price, you kind of are restricted by the fact that you have this contract to pay the carrier your phone. So if any time during that time period, you might have to return it if you want to get another phone, or at least pay at least 50% off of that device. So you are going to be a little bit restricted by that. Your flexibility does go down if you decide to finance the device. Also, you have another bill at the end of every month, which is something that weighs on your brain, along with other life responsibilities. You now have this responsibility of paying for your phone, which can be annoying for some people. So the next one is decide, are you going to buy an unlocked device, or are you going to buy a locked to a carrier device? So here's the difference for me. When you are locked to a carrier, it can be a hassle sometimes when you are done buying that device. Number one, a locked device, you have to get it unlocked by the carrier or by someone else for a fee. Usually, if you decide, okay, I'm done with this carrier, I want to try something new. Another problem with the locked devices is sometimes they do have bloatware, more so than the unlocked devices. So you might get a T-Mobile Samsung Note with a bunch of, T-Mobile stuff on it, or you might get an unlocked Note with just pure Samsung experience. So there are differences between them. For me personally, I prefer the unlocked phones, although sometimes unlocked phones don't give you carrier updates as fast. You don't get the updates sometimes as fast on the Samsung phones. At least if you do go with iPhone, you usually get the updates regardless if you get the carrier locked version or the unlocked version. But keep in mind, you are a little bit more restricted on the locked version of a phone. So make that decision really fast. Put it like this. Do you want freedom and flexibility to move around? Go with the unlocked version. Do you know you're going to be sticking with this carrier? You love your carrier. This is who you're with. You're staying with them. Then the locked phone will be just fine, because the locked phone can sometimes come at a discount too versus the unlocked phone, which sometimes has a markup just because you have that flexibility. Next, decide, are you going to go with a GSM or a CDMA carrier? Now, GSM is the global standard. So GSM is like worldwide. You can use these phones all over the world. The CDMA is kind of locked down to Verizon, for example. There's some carriers that use that. I used to have a carrier, I think it was US Cellular, that used CDMA. Did not like it whatsoever. Anytime I wanted to change a phone, I had to go to the carrier, have them reactivate it. It's a mess. So if you're the type of person who likes to switch out phones a lot, you don't want CDMA, you want the GSM standard. Also, again, with the flexibility, if you want to swap SIMs, trade between different phones, it's easier to operate on GSM. Now, it's not hard with CDMA. You just have to go to the carrier and switch it out, but it can be annoying if you just want everything to be nice and simple and efficient. But again, this doesn't really matter if you're stuck with your carrier. This is who you're with. You don't care. This doesn't matter. Sometimes, though, we'll get an exclusive phone for CDMA carriers and not for GSM, like the Motorola Razr, for example, which is rather annoying. So sometimes you have to go with a certain type if you want a specific phone. Now, I know these phones can be unlocked sometimes, the CDMA. It's still not as simple as just buying a GSM unlocked device though. Next up is to consider your budget. Are you going with a cheaper device or are you going with a premier device? Now, again, like we talked about earlier, there's financing, but consider this. If you don't think that you can get a phone because it might be out of your current price range, consider trading in an older device. Consider selling off your older smartphones that you don't really use anymore to apply to the new purchase. Also consider a yesteryear phone. Don't feel like you just can't get something just because the price doesn't match your current budget. There are many ways around these price of these new iPhones, for example, or these new Samsung phones being $1,000 and more. Especially if you just consider waiting, 6 months to a year, they drop significantly. So once you get the price down, consider, do you want Android or Apple? Now, a lot of people on this channel love Apple, but a lot of people on this channel also love Samsung and Android devices. Now, it really comes down to this. We don't need to make this long. Do you want software support? You just want everything to just work? You want a great ecosystem? You want something that's just gonna feel like it's 5 years later and you're still feeling like Apple cares about your phone? You want the iPhone. It's pretty basic. Polished apps. You want FaceTime. You don't want to download an app because it's too hard to go download Google Duo, and everybody doesn't know that other FaceTiming apps exist in the form of Google Duo or Skype, something like that. Then you're going to want an iPhone. But if you're the type of person who wants to tinker, you want to customize, or you just want to make the phone more personalized to your taste, you don't like that there's no app drawer, you don't like that you have to have every app on the home screen, Samsung and Android devices will be for you. When it comes to their cameras, when it comes to the storage, they are competitive in all those areas. Battery life competitive there as well. So another thing I learned personally that I want to share with you is just don't invest more than you know that you're going to use. So if you're the type of person who's not a major user of a smartphone, why buy an 11 Pro Max at $1,200, $1,500? It just doesn't make sense. If you know you're not going to use these cameras, you know you're not going to get the most out of this battery life, you're just not a major user, why not just get, a smaller phone, just a cheaper phone, like the iPhone 11 back there, like just a basic iPhone that'll just work for you? Or if you're with Samsung, why buy the Note if you know you're not a business user, you know you're not somebody who's a heavy user, maybe you're not someone who's going to use the 4 cameras on here? Why not just get the S10, the standard Samsung flagship phone? Or this year it's going to be the S20 instead of the S20 Ultra. Don't buy more, don't invest more that you know you're going to use. It just doesn't make sense. And there's times when I've bought phones myself that I didn't even use some of the features and I got burned. For example, last year I bought the Sony Xperia 1. The phone was amazing. We covered it a little bit on the channel, but I find myself not really using those professional video features, the cinema grade apps and stuff like that. I just find that I use the automatic camera. So I kind of bought more than I needed with that phone. So don't make that mistake. Buy what you know you need. Don't buy more than you know you need unless you just simply want to flex. And seriously, some people, they just want to flex. Strongly consider resale value before buying into a phone. Now, specifically Samsung devices tend to drop a lot faster. There's some that drop faster than even Samsung devices, and those can be names like Sony phones, LG phones, and some cheaper budget devices. Now, this is all basic economic supply and demand. As companies become more popular, their demand rises. Apple's super popular, so their phones have great resale value. If Apple tanks in popularity, which I don't see happening anytime soon, if they did, their phones would be worth nothing. Also, flop phones typically don't give you a great resale value. If the phone came out, was supposed to be popular, and it flopped, those don't give you good value either on the resale. This is only going to matter greatly if you decide to buy outright. And it all will depend on market fluctuations. As phones become less popular, their demand goes down. As phones become more popular, demand goes up. But in general, smartphones are pretty terrible investments. You're not going to make much money back on them. You buy them to use them. They're tools. Next up, seriously, if you want a good, fast smartphone experience, do not buy a cheap processor. The Galaxy A51 is a good example of this. This is an amazing little budget device, and it's going to sell very well because it offers a great screen, pretty good cameras on the back, good battery life, but it has a slower processor. And if you're looking for fast speeds, I strongly advise you to consider a premier processor phone. Now, you don't have to go up to $1,000 plus iPhone to get a premier processor phone. You can get something like the OnePlus 7 Pro with a Snapdragon 855 plus in these devices, and these fly at half the price of an iPhone. You can also find some cheaper gaming phones that will also fly for half the price of an iPhone. So don't feel like you have to go up to $1,000 to get a premier processor, but do really strongly consider your processor if you know you're going to be using the phone a lot. It makes or breaks the experience. Don't buy a budget phone if you guys want great camera quality. Again, I'm going to use the A51 here. Amazing cameras for its price point. They have really high megapixel counts, and on the spec sheet, it would fool you into thinking these are the best. But I can tell you right now that even a dual camera like the XS Max gives you a better experience because it's not always about having more, it's about the quality of that camera. And a flagship phone is where it's at if you want strong camera quality and you really care about that. Yes, you can get by with some mid-ranger phones, but if this is all you care about, I would really strongly advise you considering to spring for a flagship grade device. Again, you don't have to go up to $1,000, the top of the line. The Samsung Galaxy S10 has amazing cameras at half the price of a $1,000 phone right now. Cameras are getting good across the board, but still, flagship phones are where the strong cameras usually reside. Next up is to understand your battery usage and to understand will it last you throughout the day. The iPhone 7 is an older iPhone right here, but this phone right here does not typically last super long throughout the day. If you're the type of person who uses your phone heavily, you really want to look for a battery that's at least 3,800 milliamp hours and higher on the phone. If you're just a daily user, average user, I still would recommend nothing less than like 3,000 milliamp hours. If you go under 3,000, you start to get to phones that might not be great lasting all throughout the day. But again, you really need to understand how much are you going to use your phone throughout the day. If you're an average user, you do not need to spring more money for a larger phone battery. If you are a user who is going to be going heavy on that phone, you definitely want to consider that. Consider storage. If you are going to be using this phone and loading it up with a ton of applications, photos, videos, spring for at least a 128 gig or 256 gig model on the minimum. Now, if you're the light to average to moderate user, you're not major into phones like that, you're not using it major, 64 GBs will be enough. 32 might be a stretch even for a light user these days though. My next piece of advice that I've learned for myself that I'm passing on to you now is don't buy a phone just because you can when you know you desire something else. There's a reason you desire something else in a phone. Don't buy a cheaper device if you know you want the more premium device. Trust your inner voice and trust your intuition. The reason that you are likely desiring this phone is because that phone is the right phone for you. For example, if you're a professional photographer and right now your budget only allows for a XS Max, but you really desire the 11 Pro Max, why not just hold on to your older iPhone, save up a little bit more cash to get the Pro cameras? That's just an example right there. If you know that the S Pen is something that you're going to use a lot, you're an artist, you love to draw, or you're a business user who likes to write notes a lot, you like to tweak around with your sheets and your Excel documents, stuff like that, just save up or sell something off or sell an older phone to get it. It's going to be worth it for you. Trust that inner voice, trust that intuition. It's definitely usually correct. I've made this mistake before. I've bought phones that were 7 inches, cheap Android phones, like, oh, I'm not going to buy the biggest, the best of the best, but my phone's bigger. I got that phone was crap compared to these, more middle-sized 6.5 inch. I bought 7-inch phones before thinking they were going to be better just because they were bigger. So that's it. There's more things we could talk about here, but again, this is just 15 minutes of phone buying advice. You could talk about wireless charging, we could talk about headphone jacks, we could talk about all the little details, but I think this is a good breakdown of what you kind of need to know to really be a very happy customer and making sure that you made the right decision in your next device. What are some of your pointers and tips of buying a phone? What have you learned? What mistakes have you made? Please go ahead and comment those down below to help the community out when deciding which phone they're gonna buy next. I would appreciate that. Thumbs up if you enjoy this conversational type of video. I will consider doing more, as I really love making these videos to connect a little bit more camera face to face. And I will catch you all in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Nick here. Be sure to be well, and peace.